Looking for the Drake's kickback. I know a couple places down here that typically have it, but the last few times I've gone, they haven't had it. So I have an APB out to the listeners to come get it for me.
I'll tell you what, Berlin's in my neighborhood. It's within striking distance. I can maybe do you a favor. I got to get the exact location, but shoot me a DM and maybe I can handle that.
There you go. Kyle Dubray's got it up on the screen. Canals Discount Liquor, Berlin, Route 73. Boom. I know where that is. I'm just not making that hike.
Yeah, I know exactly where that's at. So maybe I can get over there this weekend for you.
All right. Well, this weekend's a big one. I mean, it's an interesting one anyway. You win 5 out of 7. 3 out of 4. I think the Wheeler loss is kind of disappointing. You could have swept that series, but some better baseball. Why?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is that they're really swinging the bats well. Getting Didi Gregorius back and defensively was a little bit of a hiccup this week, but having him and both Gene Segura back, getting this lineup kind of clicking here a little bit, creating a little bit more depth in it. They've had a nice week. And, before you write it off and say, hey, the Cubs have been one of the worst teams in baseball here over the last few weeks, one of the main criticisms we have about the Phillies is that they don't take care of business against inferior opponents. Look what they've done with the Marlins over the last number of years. So the fact that they had a team that was kind of reeling a little bit and they were able to take advantage of it, good for them. I think that that's a positive sign.
And, they do it last night, getting 3 home runs from Brad Miller, and it's the first time it's seemingly that Girardi has pushed the right button because people were looking at the lineup last night kind of scratching their head, and the guy he puts in that spot is the guy who essentially wins them the game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it was a little bit of a gamble for sure, and you look at the splits off that starter last night, and lefties had an OPS that was nearly 400 points higher than righties. So it made some sense from a statistical standpoint, but when you look at Andrew McCutchen, he's been one of the hottest hitters in the sport over the last month, and Rhys Hoskins had 4 extra base hits in the series and kind of had been heating up a little bit. So it was a gamble by Girardi, but it certainly worked out last night, and Jankowski was on base 2 times for McCutchen as well. So, Joe did a nice job. And maybe he can gain a little bit of momentum and start pressing the right buttons himself as well.
That would be helped if he had some better buttons to push in that bullpen. And obviously, I don't know, how big is because they play Boston. If they can just kind of hang here, they'd be 4 back if everything kind of plays out this weekend. And then it's very interesting, Bob. They got 4 with Miami, who they have struggled with. They've got Atlanta for 4. They've got Washington for 8. And then before they get to the Mets in August. By the time they get to the Mets, it should be pretty interesting. They would have had to have made a decision at the trade deadline. But you wonder how many games back do they need to be when that deadline comes for Dombrowski to say, I'm going to do something to help this team out?
Scott Fransky asked Dave Dombrowski this the other night, and his answer was that it's not so much about being within a certain number of games. It's more about how we're playing. So if the Phillies are, and I agree with that to an extent, I don't think that that's entirely being honest. I think if the Phillies are 4 games back, 5 games back, and they continue to play better baseball here, they're swinging the bats, you see a reason for optimism. That looks a lot different than, both the Mets and Phillies lose 6 out of their next 8. So I think it's a combination of things. But to answer your question for me, if they get to July 30th and they're thinking about making a move, I think they have to be within 5 games. I think for me, 5 games is probably the line. And you have to remember, too, it's not just 2 teams. It's not just the Mets and the Phillies. It's this Nationals team that's hovering around. And it's this Braves team that's hovering around as well. So if you get beyond that, I would be a little bit more reluctant to, go in and add. But if they stay within a handful of games here by July 30th, I think it's something they got to think about doing here.
They moved Segura to the leadoff spot. Does he stay there?
Joe has said recently that he, doesn't want to hit Gene in the leadoff spot. He kind of likes the idea of him hitting, in the 2-hole. And I agree with that. I don't think that Gene Segura by any stretch is your prototypical leadoff guy. In a perfect world, you get a guy on ahead of him and he can use all fields and slap the ball around and really do what he does best. Get guys in motion and make some things happen. But this team has really struggled to get production from the leadoff spot pretty much all year now. And I think for the time being, this is probably what you're going to see. Odubel Herrera has certainly been the Phillies' best center field option. He's not starting tonight. Jankowski's actually playing over him.
Again.
And they kind of have to get him going again. So for me, Odubel Herrera just doesn't have the on-base percentage to kind of lock him in as the leadoff guy. So you have to do it out of necessity.
Yeah, and I know that they mentioned earlier in the week that they were just kind of giving him some rest, right? That they were going to let him kind of just take some days off here. And Jankowski has to, other than getting run down by the catcher his first night, he's actually been a solid little piece for them. But obviously Herrera, when he comes back, do they put him back in the leadoff spot, or do you think he's better off hanging in the 8-hole?
I think until they get him going again, they're going to keep him at the bottom of the order. I think that you'll see him hit 7th or 8th until, he gets on another one of those streaks, or, assuming that he will.
Yeah, assuming that he will. All right, we got so much this weekend. They got the Red Sox, who are 20 games over 500. They've been the best team in the American League. You got Vince Velasquez, you got Matt Moore, and you've got Nola. So as much as there's been some good vibes, these three haven't been giving them to you.
No, this is a really interesting weekend for them. Boston went 3-3 on a West Coast swing. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Angels, and now they're coming back home. And like you said, they've been arguably the best team in the American League this season. You can make an argument that the Astros are right there with them. So now the Phillies kind of have to, elevate their play a little bit. Going from a team in Chicago that is bad, has been playing poor baseball, and was a little bit dinged up. And now you're getting a really good Red Sox team. That being said, they faced Garrett Richards tonight since the spider tack thing kind of came into play and the sticky substances came into play. Garrett Richards has been one of the worst pitchers in baseball. So him versus Velasquez tonight is a game that, really is kind of a toss-up. I think the Phillies can hang around in that game or certainly have a shot to win. I think the odds reflect that. Phillies are, I believe, like a plus 115 underdog tonight. So they're in the ballpark there. And then, tomorrow, Matt Moore going up against Perez. The Phillies are at a clear disadvantage tomorrow. And you've got to find a way with Aaron Nola on Sunday to beat Nick Pivetta. But Aaron Nola, after his most recent start, you look at it, among qualified starters in Major League Baseball, the day after he made his most recent start, only 9 pitchers across the sport had higher ERAs than Aaron Nola, 9 starting pitchers. And so he has, at this point you can say it. He's given them some really good outings, but he's having a bad year. And he's certainly having a bad year compared to the expectations.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I know this is a little ways off and maybe not even a possibility, but if they had to pitch in a playoff scenario, that they got to give the ball to Zach Wheeler in any Game 1 scenario, correct?
Yeah, and if everything were to hold here, and listen, here's the thing you have to keep in mind. If the season ended today, sure, it would be Zach Wheeler. But for the Phillies to overcome the Mets and hold off the Braves and Nationals, you have to assume that Aaron Nola has pitched really well down the stretch in the second half.
Fair.
So, I mean, it's kind of a hypothetical type of situation. But right now, if season ended today, it's Wheeler 1, Nola 2, because you just have that respect for him, and then Zach Eflin 3.
I get asked so much, Bob, and obviously I'm sure you do too, like would they ever consider trading Nola, and what kind of value does he have?
Would you ever consider trading Aaron Nola? Maybe, but you certainly don't do it now. This would be the lowest point that you could sell Aaron Nola since he's been a major league pitcher. So I don't really see the wisdom in that unless there's a team that really loves him. And we've talked over the last few weeks, right, about like changing the complexion of the Phillies roster.
Yep.
If some major league team had a piece that just they didn't love and they wanted to go change the scenery straight up, that's the only hypothetical I could work through. But I don't see that happening. I mean, the chances of that happening, I think, are 1 in 1,000 at this point.
Now, it was suggested that they should listen if someone calls for Wheeler. Would they?
If they were to completely tank over the next 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't hate the idea of listening. Because if you're not going to make a run this year, if you fall 9-10 games out and you're not going to get to where you want to be, how do you not listen to offers, especially offers that would return high-level prospects that are more advanced, guys that are in AA that are a year or maybe 2 max away? The Phillies can't, though, take on high-level prospects or low-level prospects with high ceilings. Like, they can't get guys that are 4 or 5 years away for a player like Wheeler. But if they're 3 or 4 games out, there's just no way that you can sell that to the Bryce Harpers, the JT Realmutos, the Andrew McCutchens of the world, the Didi Gregoriuses of the world. Assuming that, they might as well trade, Segura. They might as well trade McCutchen, too.
Real quick, I know we're hearing a lot of the Cubs. They're going to be sellers Does any of the guys there, the Bryants, Rizzos, obviously Kimbrel would, but any match?
I mean, Craig Kimbrel makes a lot of sense, and he's a guy that has an option, so it wouldn't be a 2-month, 3-month rental. Chris Bryant, if you could bring Chris Bryant and Craig Kimbrel here in a package, I think that makes the Phillies better than the Mets. I think they could run past the Mets in the division this year. But what are you trading to do that? And I mean, you're talking about some pretty good assets coming back to you, so you're going to have to give up something. So, is that one of your more advanced guys at AA or AAA? They have some interesting prospects at single A. Like, what are the Cubs interested in? Do they want a guy like Alec Bowman return? Do they want a guy that's already been in the show, that's shown some promise? I mean, that's tough. But if the Phillies had an opportunity within reason that didn't include like Mick Abel or Bryson Stott, and you could get back Craig Kimbrel, man, I would certainly explore that possibility.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on. We were looking at that yesterday, like, hey, what do you have that they would want to get Kimbrel? And if you just fix that one spot, you've blown 22 saves. If you could fix that, does that change the dynamics of the second half of the season? It just might. Bob Wankel, look for that beer for me, man.
I will. I'm on it.
Crossing Broad is where you can find Bob's Phillies coverage all weekend long. Phillies, Red Sox heading in to All-Star Weekend. I'll talk to you, pal.